Dear students, welcome to another lecture on development administration. In this lecture, we will discuss another significant thinker of public administration, namely Fred W. Riggs. The primary objectives of this lecture are to look at the emergence of comparative public administration, to understand the ecological approach to public administration, to know about Riggs' agraria-industria model of societies, to identify the features of fused, diffracted and prismatic societies, and lastly, to learn about Riggs' scale and theory of development. Dear students, before discussing Riggs and his works, we must first understand the emergence and meaning of comparative public administration. After the Second World War, the comparative politics movement gained popularity and acceptance in the United States and several other countries. While studying different nations' political systems, a few scholars also examined and analyzed their administrative systems. They had to do so because the administrative system is considered a subsystem of the political system. Some scholars like Fred Riggs, Edward Widener and Ferrell Heady took an interest in comparative politics and comparative public administration. The first organization formally formed to formulate a universal comparative theory of public administration was the Comparative Administration Group in 1960. Fred W. Riggs was the chairman of the group from its inception till the end of 1970. It was a division of the American Society for Public Administration to study methods for improving public administration in developing countries. More than providing administrative techniques, this group became a forum for intellectuals to understand why the developing countries differ so much in the practice of administration and are not able to sustain the classical theory principles of administration in their systems, even though classical theorists of administration like Henry Fayol and Max Weber preached that their principles and models of administration were universal in their element and can be applied anywhere with greatest success. The comparative administrative group gave the idea of scientific studies and emphasized the empirical and ecological study of various administrative systems. It paved the way for a new understanding of public administration, which became popular as the field of comparative public administration. Comparative public administration is a field of study that examines and compares the structures, processes, and behaviors of public administration systems across different countries or regions. It involves analyzing how governments and public agencies operate, make decisions, implement policies, manage resources, and interact with their respective political, social, and economic contexts. This field aims to understand similarities and differences among various administrative systems globally. By comparing different administrative systems, researchers and policymakers can identify best practices, learn from successful strategies in other countries, and gain insights into the strengths and weaknesses of their own systems. This helps in improving the efficiency, effectiveness, and responsiveness of public administration in different contexts. Riggs is recognized as a leading theory builder in comparative public administration. The life and work of Riggs are a verification of the claim that comparison is the beginning of knowledge. Dear students, let us now learn about Fred W. Riggs. Fred Warren Riggs was an American political scientist and a pioneer of comparative public administration. He was born on July 3, 1917 in China. His father, Charles H. Riggs, was an American agricultural engineer who was in China to advise the Chinese on experimental farming. Riggs' primary education was in China except for 1 year in the United States. He learned an early lesson in development administration when it became clear to his father that most American agricultural techniques were irrelevant to the Chinese situation. Eventually, Riggs' father developed an indigenous approach to agricultural improvement based on local conditions and tools. This observation of his father's experience would sow the seeds of the ecological approach in the minds of young Riggs. In 1938, Riggs graduated from the University of Illinois with a degree in journalism and political science. He received his master's degree from Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy in 1941. He completed his doctorate in political science with a specialization in international relations from Columbia University in 1948. As is evident, Riggs took no formal coursework in the discipline of public administration. However, he went on to become one of the most significant contributors to this field. After serving as a distinguished professor of government at Indiana University since 1956, he joined the University of Hawaii in 1967. He retired from teaching in 1987 but continued research and service activities. He passed away on February 9, 2008. Some of his major works are Agraria and Industria, Towards a Typology of Comparative Public Administration, The Ecology of Public Administration, Trends in Comparative Study of Public Administration, Administration in Developing Countries, The Theory of Prismatic Society, The Theory of Political Development, Bureaucracy and Development Administration, among many others. Riggs' creative scholarly career in the field of comparative public administration brought him worldwide recognition, especially in Asia, where he contributed immensely to the development of public administration in India, Indonesia, Korea, the Philippines, Taiwan, and Thailand. His writings have been translated into many languages including Italian, French, Korean, Portuguese, Russian, and Spanish. Dear students, let us now look at some of the major contributions of Riggs to the fields of public administration in general and comparative public administration and development administration in particular. Let us begin with the ecology of administration. Riggs has been a pioneer in formulating the ecological approach to the study of public administration. He was one of the first scholars to point out the importance of the environment for social institutions. According to him, in any given society, environment or ecology consists of physical or natural and cultural surroundings, institutions and laws, customs and values, myths and traditions. Public administration is a subsystem of the social system. It is not only shaped by the social system, but it also regulates it in turn. According to Riggs, a study of administration without reference to its environment would be meaningless. He maintains that administration does not function in isolation from its environment, and there is a continuous interaction between the two. Hence, he has focused mainly on conceptualizing the interactions between administrative systems and their environment. Let us now understand Riggs' typology of societies. In explaining the concept of the ecological approach, Riggs used the idea of structural functional systems. The structural functionalism of Talcott Parsons greatly influenced him. Riggs holds the view that each system is made up of various structures which perform specific functions. He thus came up with his Agraria Industria model. In this model, he distinguished between societies that are predominantly or characteristically industrial or agrarian. These represent the modern and the traditional types of societies. He used transitia to refer to transitional societies. According to Riggs, all societies move from agraria to the industria stage at a given point. That is, all societies are progressively developing. His typology of agraria, transitia and industria systems was superseded by the typology of fused, prismatic and diffracted societies. The models of fused, prismatic and diffracted societies are hypothetical assumptions created by Riggs to analyze prehistoric, developing and developed societies. The classification of societies into different types aims to show their movement from less developed to more developed stages and understand the phase of transition from one stage to another. Riggs explains the process of transition through an analogy of light and prism. The process of transition of a ray of light through a prism is taken symbolically to explain the process of transformation of a society. The starting point of the ray is termed as fused. The process of internal vibration of the ray within the prism is called prismatic. And finally, when the ray comes out of the prism, it gets diffracted to project a rainbow, and this process is called diffraction. On the same analogy, various social systems in the early stages of the process of development would be fused, in the transitional stage prismatic, and finally in the end they would be in a completely diffracted stage. According to this typology, from a structural functional perspective, in a fused society, a single structure carries out various functions. That is, there is no classification of functions. Contrary to this, in a diffracted society, separate structures are created to carry out specific functions. That is, there is a high degree of specialization. However, Riggs emphasizes that no society can be exclusively called either fused or diffracted. Between these two, there exists a number of societies in which the characteristics of both the fused and diffracted societies exist side by side, which he called prismatic societies. The character of every society and its relativity either to the fused or to the diffracted society depends on the nature of its various structures and the functions carried out by them, which in turn is determined by their level of development. Dear students, let us now look at Riggs' prismatic model. Riggs concentrated all his efforts to explain in detail the prismatic model, the focal point of his models. According to him, the prismatic society is one that has achieved a certain level of differentiation or specialization of roles that is necessary for dealing with modern technology, but has failed to integrate these roles. Prismatic societies share the value patterns of both fused and diffracted societies. According to Riggs, prismatic societies have important characteristic features which differentiate them from fused or diffracted societies. Let us now discuss these features one by one. Heterogeneity. The existence of a high degree of heterogeneity is the main characteristic feature of a prismatic society. Heterogeneity refers to the simultaneous presence, side by side, of quite different kinds of systems, practices, and viewpoints. For example, urban areas in prismatic society are marked with sophisticated intellectual class, Western style officers, and modern gadgets of administration. But on the other hand, in rural areas, people lead a highly traditional life with no facilities for modern living. Formalism. According to Riggs, formalism refers to the extent to which a discrepancy exists between norms and practices, between the prescriptive and descriptive, and between formal and effective power on one hand and actual practices and facts of government and society on the other. In the presence of formalism, there is a wide gap between the prescription of laws, rules, and regulations and their obedience. Riggs says that the laws, principles, and regulations laid down in the constitution of a prismatic society are not adhered to in practice. For example, in India, prohibition laws are accepted more in violation than in observation. The third feature is overlapping. Overlapping refers to the extent to which formally differentiated structures of a diffracted society coexist with undifferentiated structures of a fused society. In a prismatic society, functions are performed by old traditional structures as well as by modern ones, leading to confusion and irregularity. Overlapping in a prismatic society manifests itself in several dimensions, such as nepotism, polycommunalism, the existence of cliques, polynormativism, lack of consensus, and separation of authority from control. Another feature of prismatic societies is Sala model. Prismatic society is characterized by various economic, social, political, and administrative subsystems. Riggs termed the administrative subsystems as the Sala model. In a diffracted society, its counterpart is called a bureau or office, and in a fused society, it is termed a chamber. The Spanish word sala has a variety of meanings, such as a government office, religious conference, a room, a pavilion, etc. Riggs uses this word to describe a combination of certain features of the bureau of a diffracted society and the chamber of a fused society. In a prismatic society, family welfare, nepotism, and favoritism play a crucial role in the appointments to various positions. In a diffracted society, the considerations of kinship are kept away. In a fused society, the politico-administrative system has a patrimonial character. In the prismatic society, besides the superimposition of new formal structures on family and kinship, the universalization of laws is disregarded. Though patrimonialism is not officially prescribed, in reality it is widely practiced. The Sala officials give priority to personal aggrandizement rather than to social welfare. Their behavior and performance are influenced and governed by parochialism. As a result, the rules and regulations are not made universally applicable. A few people get more benefits from the governmental programs, ignoring the interests of a large number of people. Another feature is unbalanced polity. Riggs termed the prismatic society an unbalanced polity in which bureaucrats dominate the politico-administrative system despite the political leaders' constitutional powers. Consequently, the Sala officials play a more dominant role in decision-making processes than their counterparts in the other two systems, fused and diffracted. Due to such a concentration of powers, there would naturally be a lack of response to the people's needs and wishes. Thus, the politico-administrative system is engulfed in nepotism, inefficiency, and rampant corruption. The last feature is bazaar canteen model. Riggs termed the economic subsystem of a prismatic society bazaar canteen. In a diffracted society, the economic system operates depending on the market factors of supply and demand, and economic considerations alone govern the market. In a fused society, arena factors like religious, social, or familial considerations determine the economic transactions, and the question of price scarcely arises. In a prismatic society, both the market factors and the arena factors play side by side. Both economic and non-economic factors interact and influence the economic structures, and finally reduce the state of price indeterminacy. Under such conditions, it is not possible to determine a standard price for a commodity or service. The name bazaar canteen justifies the interaction of market and arena factors, as bazaar means market, which is a formal setup governed by economic factors, and canteen means an informal setup working on informality and familiarity. Dear students, let us now discuss Riggs' scale and concept of development. Riggs' study of societies is based on levels of development. He developed a scale of development to measure the process and levels of development in various societies with fused and diffracted models at the poles. He placed 3 X's at 3 points to show the purest forms of the 3 types of societies. Purest or ideal form means, in case of fused, hardly any development or rather no development, and in case of diffracted, fully developed society. However, exact accuracy is not possible, so the 3 positions of X's are purely notional or hypothetical. Riggs then talks about his concept of development. According to him, the pace of development of a society depends on the availability of the circumstances of development. He defined development as a process of increasing the autonomy of social systems made possible by a rising level of diffraction. Ecologically, development is increasing the ability to make and carry out collective decisions affecting the environment. Riggs considered differentiation and integration as the 2 key elements in the process of development. Differentiation means the existence of a situation in which every function has a corresponding specialized structure for its performance. Integration means a mechanism to tie together, to link up, to coordinate the various kinds of specialized roles. If the society is highly differentiated but poorly integrated, it is prismatic. Differentiation leads to development. The greater the level of development, the greater is the level of differentiation and integration. Riggs also talked about the problem of change. Generally, in a prismatic society, the pressure for change comes from internal and external sources. If the pressure is primarily external, then the change is exogenous, and if it is internal, then it is endogenous change. If the change is the result of both internal and external pressures, as in the case of prismatic societies, then the change is equigenetic. Riggs explained the dilemma of change in the manner that the more exogenetic the process of diffraction, the more formalistic and heterogeneous its prismatic phase. Similarly, the more endogenetic change, the less formalistic and heterogeneous its prismatic phase will be. Such a difference occurs because with endogenetic change, effective behavior precedes the creation of new formal institutions. But in an exogenous case, the sequence is reversed. Thus, Riggs concluded that development depends on the ecology. Dear students, let us now look at some of the criticisms posed against Riggs' works. According to Richard A. Chapman, the unrestricted use of certain words that are new and have different meanings may create confusion instead of clarifying concepts. He argues that Riggs should have prepared his own dictionary to explain his terminology. Han Bin Lee observes that his models are not helpful when the objective of administration is to change the system rather than to maintain the system. Some other critics also say in the same line that the prismatic model mainly describes developing societies but fails to explain the place and role of administration in society. Similarly, Daya Krishna examines how far these models are useful in analyzing the developmental processes and points out that Riggs prismatic models serve no purpose in finding out the stages in the process of development. Michael Monroe observed that Riggs examined the conditions in developing countries while taking America as a standard society. He also did not give any importance to the positive character of prismatic society as much as he did to the negative characteristics. Riggs is often criticized for tearing down rather than building up. His models tend to explain why Western methods do not work without suggesting what does. On the contrary, as defenders of Riggs would point out, it is worth remembering that Riggs' father did not merely explain the failure of Western agriculture. Dear students, let us now conclude this lecture. As Chapman has correctly observed, despite limitations, Riggs models have deepened our insights into some of the underlying problems of public administration in transitional societies. His approach and models help us understand the administrative process in developing countries. Riggs' prismatic theory helped to kill the belief in universal principles of administration. The influence of the theory went way beyond that. In the long run, the prismatic model has led to at least two intellectual developments critical to an understanding of public administration. One concerns the uniqueness of the American system. The other is the search for a theory of administrative relativity. Both in content and analysis, Riggs' ecological approach touches wider horizons and takes an integrated approach to administrative systems. The influence of the Riggsian thought on contemporary administration is tremendous. So, dear students, I hope you enjoyed learning about Fred W. Riggs. See you soon with another lecture on development administration. Thank you and happy learning.